101, where we discuss practical questions to equip you to share your faith more effectively. And here to help me talk about a very important question: is old Earth creationism a slippery slope to evolution? Is one of our visiting scholars here at Reasons to Believe, Mr. Mark Perez. Welcome, Mark.
Good afternoon, Krista. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank
Now,
you.
I know that you contributed a chapter in our recent book, Thinking About Evolution. Maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit about the purpose of your chapter.
The book itself is about evolution, asks questions. I think it's 25 questions about evolution is part of the title. And what we were trying to do with the chapter is to identify fallacies that can come up in some of the thinking that occurs when we're talking about evolution. So when we understand what the fallacies are, recognizing that they're not merely limited to evolution, but certainly show up there, we're able to identify them and be able to predict where they're going to show up or where they might show up, and then reverse them, or at least identify them and then take action on them. It allows us to find the truth much more easily and to avoid distortions.
So maybe the idea of fallacies is new for people. So maybe you can give us a little bit more of a definition of what you mean when you're talking about fallacies.
A fallacy is an error in reasoning or a mistake in reasoning that does not appear as if it's a mistake. And it's very easy to miss, but when it occurs, it's actually a violation of either a rules of reasoning or the rules of logic. There are formal fallacies and informal fallacies. And we'll probably talk today mostly about the informal fallacies.
Very good. So we're talking kind of about in this segment, this very common question that comes up when I talk often to my young earth creation friends at church. They will often accuse me of something like, well, the old earth creation position is a slippery slope to becoming an evolutionist. And I know they have certain concerns about me becoming an evolutionist because I'm an old earth creationist. But the slippery slope is actually an informal fallacy. So maybe you can talk to us about what the slippery slope fallacy is and how that comes into play here with that concern.
Sure. A slippery slope fallacy is an argument in which the without good causal evidence, one believes that from the starting point you're at, that this event is the first one in a sequence of events that will lead to some harmful effect. So in the case of evolution, or someone who says, if you're an old earth creationist, then you're going to slip right into believing in the macroevolution. That is a slippery slope argument, because without causal evidence to show that from old earth creationism you're necessarily going to become an evolutionist, you're making a claim that does not follow. So it is a slippery slope apparently for some people, but here's where it happens. So for some young earth creationists, they look at old earth creationism and say, well, you're adopting the very same data that the evolutionists are using. And we'll say, well, maybe in some cases we are. Then they say, well, if you're going to adopt their data, you're going to adopt their inferences. And that's where the slippery slope ends. And that's where it becomes fallacious, because it isn't necessarily the case that we are going to take their inferences. In other words, we aren't going to necessarily say that because we see the same data, we come to the same conclusions, because in fact, we do not. So it looks like a slippery slope. Oh, the old earth creationists are just buying into everything that the evolutionists say. No, we're buying into some of their data, but we're not buying into their conclusions. Therefore, it's not a slippery slope.
Very good. That's a helpful distinction. So the data that I might be buying into is that I do see scientific credibility to an old earth. And so that might be some of the data that I'm buying into, but I don't buy into the inferences. So therefore, macroevolution is true. I am, after all, an old earth creationist. So I am still believing in the inference of creation. So that is kind of what creates that stopgap from it becoming the slippery slope. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes. The important point is there is no causal evidence to believe that we will go into accepting the inferences, that's where the slippery slope ends. It's really not a slippery slope because there's no evidence that we're going to adopt those inferences, and we in fact deny those inferences.
I think understanding informal fallacies is a powerful tool in our toolbox when we are engaging in conversations, any conversations about our faith, helping us to identify those very common mistakes that we can make. So thank you for helping us understand more about the slippery slope fallacy. And I want to encourage everyone to check out the book that Mark is part of. His chapter is coming in the book called Thinking About Evolution, co-authored with our friends Dr. Fuzz Rana, Dr. Anjanette Roberts, and Dr. Sue Dykes.